Closed for this season, Chapter 2. As soon as I entered the kitchen, I blurted out, "Why didn't you tell me the old woman who used to live in this house was murdered here?" Mom looked up from the pots and pans she was trying to organize. "What are you talking about?" "Who told you that?" Dad asked at the same time. "The boy next door, Arthur. His grandmother found the body. Down there," I pointed to the cellar door, "at the bottom of the steps." "Mrs. Donaldson did die of a fall down those steps," Dad said slowly, "but she wasn't murdered, Logan." "We thought it might worry you to know that someone had died here," Mom put in. "We should have known that you would hear it from somebody else, with embellishments." "Worry me?" I repeated. "It's bad enough she died, but she was murdered. Mom, Killed. That definitely worries me." "She wasn't," Mom began, but the doorbell interrupted her. "That must be the pizza that I ordered," Dad said. We followed him to the front door, and sure enough, the guy was holding a pizza box and as he stood on the front porch. While Dad went through the business end of the delivery, the pizza guy said, "I'm glad to see somebody's finally moved up in here to poor old Mrs. Donaldson's house. It's been empty for a long time. I guess it was hard to sell, considering what happened." "Yes, the place was definitely neglected," Dad broke in before the delivery guy could finish. "I've got my work cut out for me." "Well, if you need any help, just let me know," the pizza guy said. "My name is Johnny O'Neill." He scribbled something on a card from the pizza place and handed it to Dad. "Here's my phone number. I work nights at Golden Joe's Pizza Go-Go, so I'm free in the daytime." "How are you with the lawnmower?" Dad gestured at the weedy yard. "No problem," Johnny answered. "I can cut the grass tomorrow if you'd like. $20 front and back, guaranteed neat job. I used to do it for Mrs. Donaldson before." "Great!" Dad grinned. "How about 10 a.m.? It's a deal." We watched Johnny run to his car, which sported a big pizza sign on the roof, and drove away fast. No doubt some hungry family was wondering where their pizza was. "Why do you think Johnny said poor old Mrs. Donaldson?" I asked Mom. She handed me a slice of pizza with all of the things that I loved: mushrooms, sausage, pepperoni, and extra cheese, and she shrugged. "Probably because she died, Logan." Turning to Dad, she said, "Did you notice his tattoos?" "Really professional work," Dad said, totally missing the tone of disapproval in Mom's voice. "The detail and color, the intricacy." "He'll be sorry when he's older," Mom interrupted. Giving me a sharp look, she added, "I hear it's very painful and an expensive process to have your tattoos removed." I've been thinking Johnny's tattoos were pretty cool, but I decided to keep that thought to myself. "I hope he shows up tomorrow," Mom went on to Dad. "He doesn't look like a very responsible type." His mouth was full of pizza, and Dad just simply shrugged. Just as I helped myself to the last slice, I heard footsteps in the kitchen, and I whirled around, half expecting to see Mrs. Donaldson's ghost, but it was only Arthur standing in the dining room doorway holding a cake. My grandmother sent this to welcome you," he told Mom. "It's devil food with chocolate icing, the best you ever ate." She would have brought it herself, but her hips bothering her. Since Arthur was practically drooling, Mom invited him to join us for dessert. In 1 second, he was sitting beside me holding a fork, watching Mom cut into the cake. "Don't tell Grandma," he said. "I'm not supposed to have any. She told me that it's all for you guys." "Your secret's safe with us." Mom handed Arthur the first piece, intending him to pass it down to Dad, but he kept it for himself. Before Mom had the second slice cut, Arthur had his mouth full. I guess the word etiquette and its definition were missing from his enormous vocabulary. As we ate, we learned more about our house than we wanted to know. According to Arthur's grandmother, the backyard flooded every time it rained. The roof was in bad shape, no doubt it leaked, and the porch suffered from dry rot. "Termites, too, most likely," Arthur said gloomily. "Mrs. Donaldson was getting too old to keep up with the repairs. Grandma says the place is about to fall down." Dad smiled a little stiffly. "We had the house looked at before we moved in, Arthur. The inspector gave it a clean bill of health." "Was it Mr. Lacey?" When Dad nodded, Arthur looked gloom. "Grandma says Mr. Lacey would rather stand outside in the rain and lie than come into this house and tell the truth. He is positively and absolutely crazy." She wouldn't trust him as far as she could throw him, which isn't very far, because he must weigh at least 300 pounds stark naked. Mom flashed a worried look at Dad, but he was studying our neighbor as if he were an unknown species. Unaware of Dad's scrutiny, Arthur accepted another piece of cake and lit into it with relish. I saw Johnny O'Neill deliver a pizza to your house, he said, with a mouthful of crumbs. I bet it was cold. He always stops and talks to people. Grandmother doesn't know how Joe stays in business with Johnny doing the deliveries. Must be lots of old folks that like cold pizza. He paused to lick the icing off his fingers. I guess it's because Johnny is Joe's nephew. Plus, Golden Joe's is the only pizza place in town. Not that I'd ever eat there. The health department is after Joe big time. Roaches in the kitchen, rats. Seeing that Mom was turning greenish, Dad cut into Arthur's monologue. What's the story you told Logan about Mrs. Donaldson being murdered? Well, it's true. Ask anybody. Someone broke in and pushed her down the steps. They almost killed her dog, too. Then they ransacked the house. Mom glanced at the closed cellar door. The real estate agent told us Mrs. Donaldson died falling down the steps, she said, but she didn't say anything about being murdered. Oh, Mrs. DeSilvio didn't tell you an outright lie, Arthur said with a shrug. She just left out a few details. Well, I'm disappointed in her, Mom said. Rhoda and I warned you not to think of that woman as a friend, Dad interrupted. Rhoda's a real estate agent. She wanted to sell us the house pure and simple. Well, if she would have told us the truth, I wouldn't have bought the place, Mom said. And that's exactly why she didn't tell you the truth. Dad picked up the empty pizza box and headed toward the kitchen. Let's get cleaned up. We have a big day. And we've had a big day. And I, for one, would like to go to bed early. Did they catch her killer? Mom asked Arthur. He shook his head. Grandma still thinks that he's in town. Most likely he'll strike again. You know, like those serial killers that you hear about. Just then the shrill sound of the police whistle shattered the evening. Mom gasped in alarm, and I choked down a mouthful of cake. Don't worry, Arthur said. That's Grandma calling me. I gotta go. At the kitchen door, he turned and grinned at me. I'll show you the sights tomorrow, which will take about a minute. Then we can go to the library. As soon as the screen door slammed shut, Mom and Dad looked at me as if I had invited Arthur into our lives. It's not my fault. He was lying in wait for me. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I found myself hoping Arthur was right about the termites. The sooner the house fell down, the sooner we'd move to a nice place in Fair Oaks where no one had been murdered. I'd leave Arthur behind and make new friends. Just because I'd been a nerd in Richmond didn't mean I'd have to be a nerd here. I could start all over. I could learn some sports, get better looking clothes, and I could say the right thing instead of saying something dumb.